Job chapter 16, 17. I'll start with Job chapter 16, verse 21. Pick up a couple verses before chapter 17. These actually are all, should be one. Sometimes when they divide up the chapters in the scriptures, it throws you off. And the chapters were added to be able to use the scriptures easier. But sometimes we have to kind of be careful about that. But at any rate, I want to start with verse 21 of Job chapter 16. It says, "Oh, that one might plead for a man with Eloah as a man with his neighbor." That was kind of added, but it's just a term. It's showing intensity. Most translations have that, even though it's not actually in the Hebrew, but that I could see anyway. But that doesn't matter. But you see the idea of the pleading, like this is something important. This is a wish and a desire. Oh, that one might plead. The word plead here is to make right, to correct. Oh, that one might correct to a man, for a man, to a man, legaver, with Eloah. And so he's saying that someone should make right to a man with Eloah as a man with his neighbor, or son of man, as a son of man with his neighbor. We looked at this last week, but just to bring you in. And you know, what's amazing here is when we look at this, we see that when we're looking for reconciliation between a man and God, but then also reconciliation between a man and his neighbor. And this is before Moses wrote the Torah, what we call the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, or the Pentateuch. But as we look at this, we see that the greatest commandment identified by Messiah was that thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. And then he said the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And we see that in Job, which is believed to be the oldest writing that we have recorded in the scriptures, and Job is introducing that to us. He's saying, oh, that we as men would be reconciled to God, just like we should be reconciled or to be made right or to be corrected to our neighbors. So there is that relationship between us and God and between us and our neighbors. And then he says in verse 22, he says, when a few years or a certain number of years are passed, and I believe the word here is avar, which means to cross over. A few years are passed, then I shall go the way of no return. In other words, there's a road that we are on, and he says that we should go where we do not turn back to that road again. It's like we're going to go on and never go back to that road. Now, we would look at that many times and look at this and say, well, he's talking about death, but he's just stating a particular, like a proverb where we can use this and identify this in many different areas and aspects of our life. The word for shall go is the word to walk, halak, which means to walk. So he's basically saying that the way or the road, the way that will never turn back again, will never be on that way again. I will walk from that way. And so that's really where, it describes our life. And so we have a relationship that needs correcting. Our relationship between us and God needs correcting. And sometimes our relationship between us and the neighbor needs correcting. And so when we're in those spots where there seems to be a division, a schism between us and God, or a schism between us and our neighbor. We never want to go back onto that road again. We want to be corrected, and we need to walk on from this moment on after that correction takes place. So we want to move forward. We want to keep going. And it's important because then we get to verse 1 of Job chapter 17, and he says, my spirit has been broken. The ruach, my ruach has been broken. And some translations put a breath, which means wind or breath or spirit. But we see, I think spirit is a good translation here. I'm going to go with that because it's talking about being broken or being torn away or ripped apart. When we think of spirit, our spirit, the word spirit comes from a Latin word that we get the word spiral from. It's kind of a moving spiral, spinning spirit. If you think of a horse with a lot of spirit, it's a horse that moves out. If you think of somebody that plays football with a lot of spirit, you think of him being lively, okay? And so as we think of our spirit, our ruach, we see that even though it means wind, but it also is talking about an entity of ours where we are motivated to do things. One thing about wind is that it's always moving. If it's not moving, we don't call it a wind. Okay, we say, well, there's no wind today if there's no air moving. And so it is with ruach and spirit. It's speaking of movement. That's the identity, the characteristic of wind is that it's moving. And so our spirit, so what he is saying here is that his spirit is poor, his spirit is torn away, his spirit is broken. And how many of you can identify with a broken spirit? How many of you have ever had trouble being motivated? How many of you have ever come up against a wall and just didn't know where to go from there? Previous verse is that it's a challenge for us to get right with God and get right with our neighbor and then keep walking. Okay. But he's saying here, I want to do that, but my spirit's broken. I don't have the motivation to continue on and to keep doing that. And I think that we can identify with that sometimes, that our spirits become broken. But don't become disheartened, okay? Because Messiah talked about it. He said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for they shall see God. So when we recognize that we are poor in spirit, our spirits need an oil change. We need to have regeneration. We need to get that motivation, and the best way to get it is to come to God for it, and he can motivate our spirits. He is the God of all spirits. And so we trust him for that. So he says, my spirit has been broken. My days have been extinguished. They've come to an end. Graves are for me. It's interesting. The word graves is plural. It's almost like he's thinking that he's been spending a lot of time at the cemetery. It's like he's identifying with people who have gone on already. And so he doesn't know. It's like his spirit's broken. His days have been extinguished. And he seems like he's more comfortable in the cemetery than at the coffee shop. So we find that he's describing a barrier. He's describing what do I do? Where do I cross? How do I move forward? How do I get out of this? Do you have problems getting out of bed in the morning? Do you you look at the cupboard and what am I going to eat today? Or what should I fix for lunch? Or where should I go? You look at your schedule and you're looking at 20 things. And by the time you get through reading through 20 things, you've already added 5 more things to that list. And you just don't know what to do. You find yourself in those places where it's almost like the Bermuda Triangle. You're getting lost in that, okay? And in verse 2, it says, truly, mockeries, the word for mockeries here is the word cheat, like cheaters, okay? Truly, cheaters or mockeries are with me. People are cheating me all the time. I'm I'm not saying that as a true statement. I guess I'm just bringing you into that thought. You know, it's like you go to a restaurant and you went there last week and the plate was this big, and then you go there this week and the plate is this big with the same price. You know, or you wonder, you're watching the gas go and you're watching the tank, you know, the meter as you're filling your car up with gas, and you're thinking, I wonder when the last time they checked this. You know, is it actually reading true or not? You know, whatever. We seem to have that mentality, and you know, people are going to take advantage of us, and their cheaters are with me. The cheaters, the mockeries are with me. And again, several words, as I mentioned before, several words in the book of Job were only used one time in the scriptures, and this was one of them. But basically, thinking about cheaters, and my eye rests on their insults, and so it's like our minds seem to focus on that. So we're thinking about people that are taking advantage. We're trying to give people, we're trying to give our bosses a good day of work. We're trying to be honest with other people in our lives. And yet we find people always around the corner that are always trying to take advantage of us. And it seems like that becomes our focus. We're thinking about those people. Our eye rests on their insults. Please lay down a pledge for me with yourself. And so he said, put down a pledge, a portion for me with yourself, a security. Like if you're putting a pledge, like you're securing property or something like that. Put down a pledge, a security for me with yourself. Who would strike hands with me? It's interesting in this verse that we have two pronouns in a row, me, who, which actually means who, him, or he, who, he. But anyway, so maybe we could throw this in and as a question and say, who lays down or who puts out a security for me? He would strike hands with me. Striking hands, either like clapping or shaking hands together, or it's the idea that there's noise being made, like people around in the gate watching this, witnesses testifying that there's been an agreement together. They hear the clapping of the hands, or maybe, I don't know if they did high fives back in the ancient days or not, but there is something with the hands that would identify that they were in agreement, shaking hands, clapping hands, putting their hands together, whatever it is. But it was definitely a symbol that agreement had been made. People agreed upon it. What came to my mind while I was reading through this is our Messiah. It's interesting, the death that was chosen for Messiah involved his hands, and the image of Messiah being nailed to the tree, and thinking about how I wonder if that was maybe had something to do with making covenant together, and because of the clapping of the hands or the smiting of the hands or the striking hands with me. And I think of Messiah as like I said, the death that was chosen for his execution involved the piercing of his hands. He goes on and he says, who's going to make security with me? He should strike hands with me. For you have hidden their heart from understanding. And our translators are identifying you as God. And we see that this is definitely what God does. You know, God controls our minds. A lot of things he allows, I should say, he allows us to understand some things, and then he also keeps us from understanding things. The idea of intelligence. He keeps our mind, our heart, our mind from certain information, from intelligence. You've hidden their heart from understanding or from knowing these things. Therefore, you did not exalt them. So through what we know, The more we know, the more we're going to be exalted, the more we're going to be lifted up. But God has a way of keeping knowledge away from us. I've had people say, well, don't you know? Don't you know? Haven't you ever heard that? Well, no. I mean, it's possible that there's something that I don't know. That is a possibility. I don't know what it is. You never know what you don't know. How do you know what you don't know? But at any rate, God manipulates our knowledge, not like he's in there adjusting our brain or whatever, but there's just some things. I remember, I'll tell this on my mother, but about a year before she passed away, they were here. They loved coming here and being here during the rally. But we were visiting, and it was raining, and there was lightning, there was thunder, and she was about 80 years old, which isn't that old, by the way, but she's about 80 years old, and she says, all my life I've just wondered why does it seem like it always thunders when there's lightning? And I think I know why. I think that the thunder is the sound that lightning makes. I've always thought that, but here's my mother, who's 25 years older than I am, and she said, it's just an interesting thing that it seems like all my life, every time it lightning, then there was thunder. And so I explained to her that's like the sound of a spark, and only magnified 50 million times. But I was thinking about that. I was thinking, I hope I'm right. I don't know correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know for sure, but I'm thinking, how do you know? There's some things that we know how do you know that? How did that come to you? Who told you that? Well, I just always knew that, but just because you always knew it doesn't mean the next guy always knew it. We don't have the same color of green. And so as we think about that, Job is saying here, he says, you put people in our paths that teach us certain things, but not all of us have the same teachers. You put us through different situations of life and different experiences. And so we learn things. I learn things that you don't learn, and you learn things that I have not learned. But God is the source of all things, so he's dealing out certain knowledge. So don't beat yourself up. Oh, I should have known that. What is it? Everybody else knew that, but I don't know that. Why is that? Don't beat yourself up because you don't know something. God puts things in our life to teach us, and God keeps us from learning certain things so that we don't get puffed up, braggadocious, and exalted. He saves that for certain people that he chooses. Verse 5, he says, he who denounces friends for a share. The word denounce is actually a very familiar word, means to address or answer. Nagad, he answers friends for a share, you could translate that bribery, or for money or whatever. So he does this for money. Even the eyes of his children shall fail. Now this sounds just like a proverb out of Solomon's writings, out of the book of Proverbs. Something like that you would have read, that just a blanket statement. He who denounces friends for money, or takes a bribe, or speaks to friends for money, even the eyes of his children shall fail. Why do you have a friend? Well, I want to have a lot of friends because if I need to borrow some money, I need to have a lot of friends I can borrow from. Well, then your children are going to watch that. He's saying that the next generation, their eyes are going to grow dim. Their eyes are going to end as far as that goes. And they're not going to see clearly. We're talking about not our eyes that are in our head, but our intelligence, our understanding, things that we know, things that we experience. So our children are not going to experience the right things if we're using our friends just to get money. Verse 6, but he, talking about the cheater from verse 2, okay, so, but he has made, I know it's capitalized here, we could say it's God, or either one, all right, but I might have spoken out of turn there, but we'll go on. But he has made me a byword of the people. That I see. The reason that I didn't know if this pronoun was actually talking about God or not was because we don't have that introduced to us so much. But at any rate, that's not the point. The point is that Job is saying that I've become a proverb to the people. I've become an allegory, a byword to the people. Whereas in former times, I was as a drum. Somebody told me one time, well, drums are not in the Bible. You sound like my mother. But the fact is that actually drums are in the Bible. It's just that the word drum is not in the King James Version. And so we don't have it. It actually, in Strong's, unless you go to the Hebrew word taf or top, which we actually get the word in English tap. So to tap or to drum. If you look up the definition in Strong's, tafet, or tapping or striking or drumming. So there are drums. We have the word tambourine, tabret, I think is how you pronounce the instrument. But at any rate, there was tapping. When we think of a drum, we think of keeping in time. So like if in a military situation, there would be the drumming that would keep everyone in step, basically like in celebrating, or the women would play their tambourines, and they would keep everyone in rhythm. Everybody would dance to rhythm with the tapping of the drums. But also the tapping can be irritating. I was always kind of a fidgety type of person. I remember as a kid, sitting at the table and before supper would start and picking up a knife and a fork and tapping on the table until it basically would drive my mother to tears. And then she'd tell me to stop or whatever. I don't know. Do any of you do that? Tap, just sit there at the table, just tapping or something. An irritation. Okay, so the idea here also is an irritation. So he says, I used to be a motivator. Okay, getting back to this, I used to keep people in time. I used to be the guy that kept people going, kept people moving down the road. He said, now I've become a byword. Now I've become a proverb. Now I've become like a satire, an allegory. And so where's my purpose at? Okay. And from sorrow, or this is more than sorrow. This is more like anger. From sorrow, my eye has grown dim, or again, my understanding, my reasoning has become dull. And all my members that here is like our limbs, our legs, and parts of our body. But when we think about this, it's what we build with, our building materials, what our structure is made out of. So all my structure are like shadows. You can't build on a shadow. You can put a shadow on the wall. You can't hang anything on that shadow, You can hang it on the wall, but the shadow does not really exist. It's just the lack of light. And so he says, my building materials, my structure has become shadows. I can't build anymore. The anger has caused my understanding to grow dim. I know that you can identify with this. I know that there are times when, you just kind of get pumped up, or you get kind of angry with a certain situation or whatever. You're trying to do something, and it's like you can't see, something could be right in front of you. The obvious is right there, but you can't see it because of the anxiety, the frustration. It takes your mind off. It keeps you from being at your best. And so through these verses now, he's describing what he's feeling with his spirit being torn away, with his spirit being broken. Then he goes in verse 8 and says, upright ones are astonished at this. They're amazed. Upright or straight ones are astonished at this wonderment. The innocent stirs himself up against the defiled ones, or the hypocrites, stirs them, the innocent. And the righteous, verse 9, the righteous holds or seizes to his way. And he who has clean hands, he who is pure, becomes stronger and stronger, is added strength, has added strength. So is it good to be upright? Is it good to be straight? Is it good to be legal? All right, yes. You should be astonished. I mean, when you see things that are going wrong, you're probably amazed. Why is that happening? The innocent, is it good to be innocent? Yes, it's good to be free from guilt. To be against the hypocrites, the defiled ones, the soiled ones, spiritually, yes. The righteous, is it good to be righteous? Yes. Is it good to hang on to your way? If you're walking the path of righteousness, is it good to stay in that path? Sure. If you have pure hands, if the things that you do, when we see hands, it's because that's identifying what we accomplish, what we're doing. Is it good to have pure hands? Is it good to have clean hands? Do things that are clean? Is it good to have added strength? In verse 10 it says, but please, or Anna, however, please come back again. Shuv, turn back again, all of you. For I do not find a wise one among you. When we look at ourselves and we think, okay, I'm righteous, I'm innocent, I'm straight, my hands are clean, what I do is clean and pure, but where's the wisdom? That's interesting. Where's the wisdom? Well, what is wisdom? Wisdom is taking the information and discerning it. Discernment. Choosing, you can have all the information, but being able to choose, being able to discern. It's a step above just knowledge. There are a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have the wisdom, the discernment to go with the knowledge. It's missing. And if we go to Proverbs, we find that Proverbs actually personifies, or Solomon actually personifies in Proverbs wisdom. And it's messianic. It's speaking of Messiah. Messiah is wisdom, is the wisdom of Proverbs. And so we see a lot of people that are doing the right things. A lot of people that you would look at and say, well, they're innocent. You go to court, there's no way any prosecutor would find that anything wrong with them. They're straight. They have all the good characteristics. They do things in a clean, open, honest way, but they still don't have Messiah. They still have never received Yahusha into their lives. They're doing all the right things, but they don't have a personal relationship with God. They need to be corrected, as we saw in the previous chapter. They need to be made right with God. It's not what we do and what people see that we're doing. Man looks on the outward appearance, God looks on the heart. And so we can look the part, but unless we have wisdom, we're missing that important element. We can do all the things religiously, but unless we have a personal relationship with Yahusha HaMashiach, Jesus Christ, we're missing the boat. We're running parallel to what is right. And so we need Messiah. And I can't stress that enough, because we can get to the place where we look in the mirror and we think, well, man, you're pretty good. You're doing all the right things. But do you have wisdom? What are you doing with the knowledge? Do you even have the ability? And so, as we're thinking about the broken spirit, the fix to the broken spirit is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, with Yahushua HaMashiach. And this is Job telling us this. My days have passed by. Okay, so here, my days have crossed over, Aver. My days have passed by. My plans, the word for plans or purpose here, most of the time is something that's bad. Okay, like designing some sort of evil action, planning to rob the bank or whatever it may be. He says, my plans have been broken off. So he's talking about that relationship with God. He says, my days have crossed over. The Hebrew way is to cross over. Aver means to cross over. Hebrew comes from the word aver, from the verb aver. And so the Hebrew way is crossing over. Did you know that before Moses, there were Hebrew people? Before Abraham, there were Hebrew people. There people that believed in the Almighty God, people that were monotheistic, people that knew who God was, and God brought about. He called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldees and brought him into the promised land, and then gave him the promises. And first there were the Hebrew people, and then there were the Israelites as he brought them out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim. We came out of Egypt, and he created a nation. And so then we have the Israelites. And then from the Israelites, then we have the Jews coming basically from the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And so we have this evolution taking place of God's people. But the fact is that it began by crossing over. It began by obeying God, by leaving the old path, by taking on the new path, having a correct relationship with the Almighty. Your spirit is broken. You cannot see your spirit mended until you make things right with God. He is the great motivator. So he says, my days have passed. Those days are passed by. My plans have been broken off. I'm not doing things for myself anymore. I'm not doing things the way that the world does things. I'm breaking those things off. The desires of my heart are no longer important. What God wants for my life, those are the things that are important. They would turn night to day. The desires of my heart would mix everything up. They would turn night to day. They would say the light is near when in the presence of darkness. If I wait, verse 13, the word wait means to collect or to gather. If I stop and gather together or bind together, the grave, this Sheol, the grave is my house, and I shall make my bed, I shall spread my bed out in darkness. I shall say to corruption, you are my father. To the worm, you are my mother and my sister. The word corruption here is the same word for grave that we had previously. And so he says, if I kept to my own desires, I'd be all mixed up. I would be saying that night is day and day is night. If I bound together with my past, if I didn't separate, if I didn't move forward, I'm just going to end up in Sheol. Verse 15, it says, where then is my expectancy? The word expectancy means like a cord, or it's translated hope in the King James most of the time. What we expect. Where then is my expectancy? This is really intensive. Where is my expectancy? As for my expectancy, who would see it? Would it sink down into the grave? Would we together go down into dust? Have you ever watched the geese fly? The V that they make? You know why? How they decide which goose is in the front? The fastest goose is going to be in the front. But there are times as you're watching them, there are times when one goose will break away. Almost as though that the goose that's in the front may be the fastest, but he really doesn't know where he's going. But there's another goose that's behind him that knows where they need to be going. And so he breaks away from the pack, from the, from the flock, the herd of geese that are flying over. Flock. And he breaks away because he knows where he's going. He quits following the leader because evidently the leader doesn't know where he's supposed to go. And he breaks away, and then it's not too long before everybody's following this other guy. Because, hey, he knows where he's going. Messiah said it this way. He said, as the blind lead the blind, they both fall in the ditch. He says, if I stop to wait, if I stop to bind myself with the same lifestyle, with the same road, with the same people, with the same identity that has destroyed my spirit, Sheol is my home. All I have to do is look, that's where I'm headed. I have to break away. I have to break away from what I've been doing. I have to change my direction. I have to change my identity. I have to move forward. And expectancy or hope. If you have faith, do you need hope? I wonder sometimes if when we expect God to do something and it doesn't happen the way we expected, that has a negative effect on our spirit. If we expect somebody to show up and they don't show up, I don't have the answer to this, but I was just wondering, think about expecting. If you have no expectations, you say, well, that's kind of being fatalistic. No. Let's think about having no expectations. You don't expect anything from God. You don't expect anything from the people in your life. You don't expect anything from yourself. You don't have any expectations. But you replace the expectations with faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. So you could take and replace your expectations with faith. Allow your faith to become stronger. It's not like you're expecting more or expecting different, but you're walking by faith. You're not supported by expectations. Expectations leads to disappointment. But if we walk by faith, if we just say, okay, I'm going to let go and let God have his way in my life. I'm going to break away. I'm going to be healed. My relationship with God and my neighbor is going to be healed, and my spirit is going to be revived, and I'm going to walk. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to walk in faith, and not in some pipe dream, but I'm going to trust God and walk with him. If you ever find your spirit broken, if you ever find your spirit torn away, usually by broken promises, remember these principles. If you went by your own intelligence, you're just on a spiral. You need to trust God. You need to follow him. You need to follow the path that he gives you and believe that he has your best interest in mind, and follow that path, and God will stir up your spirit again. You'll say, oh, I can do this. I can move forward. I can get out of bed. I can put the car in gear, I can get back on the horse. There are there are times when our spirits can become disabled, but God is the power of our spirit, and we need to just search him out, seek him out, and follow him.